Members, the sitting is now resumed. It's time for questions to the Minister for Infrastructure. Questions 3 and 4 have been withdrawn. I call Mr Chris Little to ask the first question.
Question 1.
I've made clear my desire to change the way we use our roads and streets to ensure they work for the whole community, including residents and businesses alike. Providing safe routes that give people the freedom and confidence to walk, wheel and cycle as part of their everyday routine is an important way to achieve higher levels of active and sustainable transport and fewer car journeys. LTN 120 emphasises that separated cycling space should be prioritised, and this is the kind of quality infrastructure that I want to see introduced. It also indicates that a well-constructed shared-use facility designed to meet the needs of cycle traffic, including its width, alignment and treatment at side roads and other junctions, may be adequate where pedestrian numbers are very low. The reality, and I appreciate this is a source of frustration to many, is that the delivery of schemes takes a number of years to develop due to consultation, design of services and the acquisition of land. The challenge that we face in Northern Ireland is that we are moving from a situation where there is little infrastructure to one where we will have the best quality infrastructure, and it is not always possible to do this in one step. While providing a wide shared facility in the short term can be a step in the right direction, I wish to move as quickly as possible to full implementation of LTN 120.
Mr Little.
Thank you, Principal. Deputy Speaker. I thank the Infrastructure Minister for her answer and her commitment to delivering improved cycle infrastructure in Northern Ireland. But can I respectfully press the Minister to ask if the new schemes in Ballymena and Belfast will indeed include separate cycle lanes, adequately separating cyclists and pedestrians as per that cycle infrastructure design manual LTN 120?
Well, in respect of Ballymena, the two schemes that are currently developed are the construction of a dedicated cycle path at the Larne Road link, and it's expected to commence in the new year and will provide nearly 550 metres of segregated cycle path with some shared paths linking to it at either end. And design work is also planned and ongoing for the footway cycleway scheme on the Antrim Road. I do understand the point that the member is making, and I wish to move to the implementation of LTN 120 as quickly as possible. And as a demonstration of that, we have put in place new blue-green teams in each of our roads divisions. We have created 17 new posts, so staff are being trained in LTN 120, and arrangements are underway to ensure as many roads engineers receive training as is required. And I expect that training will have been delivered to around 35 engineers this financial year. So I do understand people's frustrations at the pace of change, but we are moving from a very, very low starting point, and I want to accelerate things as quickly as I can.
Mr Jim Allister.
Has the Minister taken time to review the disastrous scheme that her department has enforced without consultation in Ballymena, outside Swemish College, which has removed bus parking bays for hundreds of children who must attend that school by bus? The Education Minister has taken the time to visit the school and seen the absurdity of the scheme for herself, but the Roads Minister apparently is deaf on this and doesn't even want to see it. Will she address that issue?
I thank the member for his question, but I'm not the Roads Minister. That is an outdated, old-fashioned understanding of the role of the Minister for Infrastructure. But what I would say is that I am aware, and I have expressed this to the member, that I am aware of the concerns expressed about the construction of a new footway and cycle scheme at Larne Road and the displacement of parking directly outside the school. And this scheme forms part of a larger network of active travel schemes proposed for the Ballymena area. The member will also know that my department's officials have been engaging with the school principal and TransLink to determine if any adjustments can be made to bus stop and access arrangements at the school, and will continue to monitor the impact of the scheme.
Ms Ciara Ferguson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Minister, it's very clear that we need protective cycle lanes separate from other traffic to increase safety and encourage people to take up cycling. However, I understand there's no segregated cycle lanes in Derry City, and whilst Belfast has a cycling plan, Derry doesn't. So surely it's an inequality, and surely the people of Derry deserve proper cycling infrastructure. So will the Minister commit to working with the local council to produce a Derry cycling network plan?
I thank the member for her question, and while we should be doing much more and investing much more in active travel, I'm pleased to say that as Minister we are investing record high levels comparatively in active travel. But of course we need to be doing more, and I am very keen to work with the local council. We did bring forward initiatives as a result of the COVID pandemic in terms of people-centred place shaping in Derry, and I'm very keen to continue to work with local elected representatives and also the council to roll out active travel opportunities, be they the Strathfoyle Greenway, which I'm investing in, or walking or cycling facilities. Very happy to do so.
Mr Matthew Toole.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. And Minister, we've heard today about the fact that some in this chamber are still stuck on the idea that roads are the only way to travel. Belfast is one of the most congested cities in these islands. It's some of the worst air quality in these islands, and it is given priority to the car for too long. So, Minister, could you give us an update now on broader plans, specifically pop-up cycle pilot schemes in Belfast?
Pop-up cycle lanes have been a popular addition to city centre streets right across the world, actually, particularly in response to the pandemic. I'm pleased to say that I have published the full report of the review of cycle lanes, and I have listened to all of the feedback, and that's why I'm taking forward measures to make further improvements to active and sustainable travel in that area. I will be taking forward legislation to introduce a bus lane along Dublin Road, which will improve public transport on this corridor, subject to consultation processes. Work has already begun to restore the second lane, which will be available to all traffic until the legislative process is completed. And I remain committed to enhancing our active and sustainable travel facilities, which allow us to connect communities, improve our health and well-being, and of course tackle the climate crisis.
Mr Alan Chambers.
Number 2, Mr Principal Deputy Speaker.
I am pleased to advise that delivery of winter service functions within DFI has been ongoing since the 18th of October 2021 and will continue until end of the winter season. As part of planning for the winter gridding programme, my department ensures that adequate staff resource is available, all winter service equipment is in satisfactory working order, and there are adequate supplies of salt. There are also arrangements in place to supplement contracting resource and stocks of salt during the winter period if this becomes necessary. The Department generally salts the main through roads, which carry more than 1,500 vehicles per day, with roads having difficult topography and carrying between 1,000 and 1,500 vehicles daily also being salted in exceptional circumstances. Preparing for the emergency response to flooding is an ongoing process throughout the year, as heavy rainfall can occur at any time, but as winter arrives there is an increased risk of adverse weather which could lead to flooding conditions. The Department operates an on-call duty and flooding officer rota system 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, with staff on standby to respond to flooding, and this is in addition to routine cyclical inspections. My department's arm's-length bodies, TransLink and Northern Ireland Water, also have response plans in place over the winter months.
Mr Chambers.
Thank you, Minister. I certainly would commend all your staff who work to keep our roads safe during the winter and probably very challenging conditions when the rest of us are tucked up in bed. But Minister, a feature of winter weather, and you did allude to it there, is localised pooling and flooding on roadways that can prove to be dangerous. Does your department identify hotspots where this habitually occurs and provide additional gully clearing or more long-term solutions in these areas?
I first of all want to thank the member for his very kind words to our staff on the ground, and I will make sure that that is fed back to them. I'm sure they will be very appreciative of it. The department does keep a very close eye on areas of concern, and also there are routine inspections as well. In addition to that, when our operational staff are out and about on the ground carrying out a range of services, they feed back any issues that need to be examined and rectified, so that is always on an ongoing basis. In terms of gully cleaning, that is a very important service carried out by my department. Of course, I would like to do much more in a range of services, but unfortunately, due to the budget cuts imposed on the department a number of years back, services have had to be reduced. That, I think, is not just disappointing, it is counterproductive, and that's why I continue to make the case at the Executive for increased funding to be allocated to the Department for Infrastructure so they can carry out those services that are so critical to communities and to businesses across Northern Ireland.
Ms Liz Kimmins.
Let's call in and thank the Minister for her answer so far, and to echo the comments of the previous member in paying tribute to the staff. Minister, just one of the biggest issues we get probably as MLAs in terms of winter preparedness is around those roads leading to schools that aren't included on the Gritton schedule. And I think of examples in my own constituency, the Tullyar Road in Balleaks and Chapel Road in Mike. And I would ask the Minister if she's considered adding important roads like those leading to primary schools and secondary schools, particularly in rural areas, to the winter Gritton schedule, and looking at the policies around that.
Well, the current policy is to salt main through routes carrying more than 1,500 vehicles per day, and other busy through routes carrying more than 1,000 vehicles per day where there are specific difficulties such as steep hills. The current policy means that 28% of the road network is salted, and that's serving 80% of daily traffic across the north. I would like to be able to do much more when it comes to our winter gritting service, but if we were to increase that to say 90% or 100% of our network, you would be doubling the cost of winter service to 14 million or quadrupling it to 28 million pounds. That's just not financially feasible. But in terms of trying to address difficulties in roads that aren't on our salting network, we are happy to provide grip boxes. We've provided over 5,600 grip boxes across the north, and we've also provided 63,000 grit pads, and I know a number of those are located at schools. So if the member does have schools that she's concerned about where grip pads haven't been provided, for example, I'm very happy to consider a request.
Mr John Blair.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister for the answer so far, and also like to associate myself with the gratitude expressed for those working in severe weather conditions. But separate to that, in relation to the increased occurrence of extreme weather, can I ask the Minister what contingency measures the Department is putting in place to deal with any future storms which may be as bad as or worse than those seen recently?
The member is right to highlight the increase in severity in terms of the impact of the climate emergency, which leads to extreme weather events. If we just even look at Storm Barra, the most recent storm that we have had to experience here in Northern Ireland, my department received 571 high priority inquiries. 247 of those related to fallen trees and branches causing an obstruction on roads. So, of course, my department works very closely with the Met Office in terms of trying to identify periods of extreme weather, making sure that we have all the plans and preparations in place, and then obviously working with our range of partners across emergency services, other government departments, and also with communities as well, trying to ensure that we can be as prepared as possible. But of course, if we aren't serious about tackling the climate emergency, then regrettably extreme weather events are going to become more and more frequent.
Questions number 3 and 4 have been withdrawn. So, question number 5, Mr Mervyn-Store.
Question number 5.
My department is currently developing the new Regional Strategic Transport Network Transport Plan, which will set out priorities for investment in our road, rail and interurban limited stop bus network, including park and ride through to 2035. Since coming into office, I've been clear that it's my priority to address regional imbalance, tackle the climate crisis and better connect communities across our island. It is essential that we get the new RSTNTP right, and I expect to publish a draft RSTNTP for public consultation when the work has been completed and I've had time and the opportunity to consider it. Following that, I would welcome representations from members, stakeholders and communities, and I will use the feedback received to inform any final decision on the content of the final plan.
Mr Story.
Thank you, Mr Principal Speaker. The difficulty, Minister, we have with the answer you've given today, that it's a repeat of what we've been hearing now for the last number of months, because all we get is that we're planning to do this. And in fact, in one answer to another member in this House, you had actually said that you intend to publish a draft plan for public consultation late in 2021. Well, we're getting pretty late at this minute in time. But can the Minister give me an assurance that the delay is not to ensure that roads networks that are priorities are going to be treated in a way which is unfavourable? For example, the A26 north of Larryford in my own constituency in North Antrim, and junctions such as the Kirk Road and the Newark Road that need to be seriously addressed to improve safety and improve the experience of road users. And with this, Minister, would also conclude to pay tribute to your staff for the work that they do.
To be fair, brevity, I think the Minister has the point. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker. Again, thank you very much for the positive comments on staff. Again, I'll make sure that it's fed back, as well as Liz Miskimmon's comments as well, because our staff work in communities and they want to do everything they can to improve our road network, our infrastructure, and they are operating under difficult financial circumstances. And so sometimes when members of the public are frustrated, unfortunately the people who bear the brunt of that are frontline staff, and that's not fair. In terms of the Regional Strategic Transport Network Plan, it is a considerable piece of work, and it's important that we get that piece of work right, because it will determine the capital projects that are coming forward for road and rail for a considerable number of years into the future. So officials are continuing to work on that, and we will be going out to consult when it is completed, that work, and I've had the time to consider it. In terms of the A26, which was one of the roads, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, that Mr. Story raised, I just want to say I'm aware of the tragic accident or the death as well on the Frosses Road, just north of the Jones Road roundabout, and I understand that that accident is still under investigation by the police, and I hope that the member would understand that it would be inappropriate for me to comment any further at this time, but just to let him know that I'm very conscious of it.
Mr. Roybags.
Thank you, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker. One of the key failings highlighted in previous regional roads network plans has been the York Street junction. So can the Minister advise us, when are we going to learn what the new plans, the new concept are, and how the congestion and the pollution that is occurring there is going to be addressed?
Just to reassure the member that he will know, he doesn't need me to rehearse it, that I want the scheme to work for those that will use it and those that live around it. And I want to ensure, as we all do, that schemes, capital schemes of such significance, are future-proofed. So I accepted in full the 6 recommendations of an insurance review, and work is ongoing to maximise ambition in terms of what can be delivered for communities, connectivity and the wider Living Places agenda. I'm expecting to receive the report this month, and that will then allow me to quickly identify the next steps. I want to reassure members that I recognise the strategic importance of this scheme, but I want to make sure that it is the right scheme, as I said, for those that use it, but also for the communities who live around it, who have been completely separated. And I would argue that the West Link in its current format has actually caused harm and detriment to the communities who live around it. So I'm very keen to receive this report. I'm very keen to move this project forward, but I absolutely want to make sure that we're moving the right project forward.
Mr. Pat Catney.
Thank you, Mr. Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answers so far. Minister, with the Regional Strategic Transport Network Plan, can you provide an update on the major roadworks which are under construction, and on the back of that as well, for the Knockmore link, which is in my constituency, would that plan be a good time in order to feed in to see can we get that railway open to Antrim from Lisburn? Thank you.
I know the member has been a tireless campaigner for this particular stretch of our rail network, and obviously these issues will be considered as part of the Regional Strategic Transport Plan, but he will also be aware of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review as well, which is looking at the existing rail network to see how it can be improved, looking to see where new rail connections should be provided, and also importantly looking at rail connectivity to our international gateways, so our ports and airports, and also then looking at the potential of the rail network for freight. So there will be a lot of new opportunities for people to engage in that process, and I was very pleased to announce with Minister Eamon Ryan the public consultation phase of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, and I would encourage members to feed into that. In terms of the major works that are ongoing, works are continuing to progress on the A6, which has one of our largest ever construction projects on site. And we are working on a number of flagships because we're very keen to continue to progress those and to keep pushing those forward. That's why I'm very pleased that we will, I hope, move to multi-year budgets, because that will give greater certainty to the Minister for Infrastructure in driving forward capital projects. And I just hope that we get the resource allocation that is sufficient to ensure that we can deliver on those big capital ambitions.
Sir Andrew Muir.
Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, this plan is crucial, but yet just a few weeks after COP26, the Infrastructure Committee has received a letter from the Finance Minister shrugging his shoulders at the financial plight of TransLink and the need to invest in public transport, and stating that steps must be taken by the Department for Infrastructure and TransLink to put its finances on a more sustainable footing. What's the Minister going to do when the Finance Minister continues to shrug his shoulders at this issue?
Well, the member raises a very important and concerning issue. And I know that the Finance Minister is very quick to point out, and rightly so, the financial support that was provided to our publicly owned public transport network in the face of COVID, given passenger numbers were decimated and therefore income. But I also am becoming increasingly concerned at the Finance Minister's push for cuts to our public transport network, because TransLink has delivered a number of efficiencies. It did so during COVID as well. And I hear from members right across this House calls, and very passionate calls, for the expansion of our public transport network, expansion of our bus network, or expansion of our rail network. But I have to be honest with people, I share that ambition, but I'm battling right now to ensure the survival of our existing public transport network. That's not good for connecting communities. That's not good for tackling regional imbalance, and it's certainly not good for tackling the climate crisis.
Mr Cathal Boylan.
Thank you, Mr Principal Deputy. And could I welcome the Minister's answer so far. Minister, the DFA Committee carried out an inquiry into the decarbonisation of the transport network, and one of the priorities arising from our recommendation was a green transport policy. Given the important role that rail plays, under this new transport plan, is there an opportunity for new rail connections and extensions, i.e. you're aware of the feasibility study into the Portadown Armagh Rail? Is there an opportunity under the Regional Strategic Transport Network Transport Plan, or the RSTNTP? Is there opportunities there for that?
I thank the member for his question, and as he's rightly identified, I've provided funding for the feasibility for Portadown Armagh railway link. I'm also getting the Phase 3 back on track in terms of Derry, and also the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review. And I was very heartened by the committee's report on decarbonisation, and I agree with the member that rail has a really important role to play in that. But I must come back to the point that I've just made. We're going to be battling here to maintain existing transport links in terms of our publicly owned public transport network. That will materialise. Those concerns will materialise if we don't see a sufficient allocation coming forward in January monitoring. So at the minute, my focus is on ensuring and making the case to the Finance Minister and others to ensure that we get sufficient funding to protect our existing public transport network, but I won't apologise either for being ambitious around the growth of it. And so I will look to members right across this House to be supporting the Minister for Infrastructure, putting party politics aside, and supporting bids to ensure that we can not only maintain the publicly owned transport network upon which so many of our citizens rely, those who can't afford cars, but also that we're able to grow it.
Mr Thomas Buchanan.
Number 6.
I can confirm that work continues at pace on the development of the A5 Western Transport Corridor project, which I acutely recognise is of significant strategic importance to the region, helping to tackle regional imbalance, improving the economy, job prospects and prosperity, connecting communities and improving road safety. Following receipt of the interim report from the PAC and the public inquiry held during 2020, officials have been working on development of a new environmental statement addendum for consultation. It is anticipated that the public inquiry can then be reconvened as recommended by the PAC next year. Receipt of the PAC's final report from the inquiry should then allow a new ministerial decision to be taken, and subject to the successful completion of the necessary statutory processes and environmental assessments, the construction of Phase 1A, new buildings to north of Strabane, could then commence. The programme for scheme delivery in recent years has alluded to full scheme completion by 2028, and although some slippage has occurred, this time frame remains achievable.
Thank you, and thank the Minister for a response. Minister, last week we saw another fatality on this particular road. Another year has passed, hundreds of thousands have been spent, not one sod has been turned as yet on this road, and we're talking about more environmental statements, more delays. Can you give this House some indication today as to when work will actually start on site? We're not, we have all these statements coming forward, but it seems to be pushed away back into the abyss. Give us some indication as to when the work's actually going to start and we're going to see diggers in sight.
Well, I understand the member's frustration on this project, and I share it. I'm particularly frustrated by the fact that the second public inquiry gave the green light to the A5, but unfortunately we had no ministers in place to take that work forward, which is why we then had to go to a third public inquiry, and quite unexpectedly that public inquiry delivered an interim report, not a full report. And so in order to move things forward and complete all of the statutory processes in the quickest possible timeframe, we've accepted the recommendations. Officials are working hard to get that work completed and to go out to public consultation so that it can go to a reconvened public inquiry next year. The Minister for Infrastructure has no authority over when a public inquiry can be held. That is a decision for the inquiry, not for my department. But as I have said, the programme for scheme delivery is still on track for 2028. That still is achievable, and certainly that's the time frame that I've been saying to my officials we need to work to.
Nichola Mallon.
And I thank the Minister for her answers so far. Minister, the A5 is a hugely important flagship project. And it's really important for the people of West Tyrone, and the delays to the project are really frustrating for the people of West Tyrone who do use it so frequently. With the public inquiry set to reconvene next year, if there is a positive outcome to that inquiry, can I ask, is your department ready, properly prepared to finally see the vital project commence?
It is a hugely important project. It's a strategic project, given it's a strategic corridor. It's also key in terms of tackling regional balance, and obviously, as other members have stated, there are huge road safety concerns as well that would be addressed by the construction of this road. So my officials are working at pace to complete all of the statutory processes, and that work is ongoing. As I said, it is frustrating that it has been subject to legal challenge on so many occasions. It is frustrating that when there was a green light at the second public inquiry, there was no minister in place to push it forward. But we are where we are now, and so I'm very keen that my officials continue to work at pace, and I hope that we can get an expedited date for a public inquiry, and so that we can move through the construction of this really important road.
Mrs. Rosemary Barton.
Thank you, Minister, for your answers so far on the A5. Minister, the interim Commissioner's report highlighted the Ballygawley-Tucknacloy section of the A5 could not be justified, as the traffic volumes would not justify dualling. However, will you as Minister take the Commissioner's advice and prioritise sections such as the Omagh bypass and Strabane bypass so that planning permission can be granted and work will be able to commence improving the A5?
I thank the member for her question. The original scheme that was put forward through the North-South Ministerial Council in 2007 was for a dual carriageway from new buildings to the border at Auchnacloy, and the A5 dualling project is also recognised as a flagship project by the Executive and is a commitment of the Executive and both the British and Irish governments in New Decade, New Approach. The member is right that in its interim report from the public inquiry, the PAC has taken the view that there is an obligation on the department in its role as statutory decision-maker to consider reasonable alternatives to the proposed scheme, and therefore need to examine matters such as the extent to which town bypasses and selected improvements to the existing A5 would meet or fail to meet the overall aim and objectives of the dual carriageway scheme. I have instructed my officials to carry out and then publish this assessment as part of the new environmental statement addendum in accordance with the PAC recommendations. But for me, the focus has to be on completion of all of the statutory processes, getting this project back to a reconvened public inquiry, and then moving through as quickly as possible to construction.
Mr Keith Buchanan.
Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, and thank the Minister so far for answers. Minister, on the theme of Western transport, you were very welcome last week in Cookstown, obviously with the A29 bypass and the preferred route launch. I presume your officials, Minister, is still in the phase of engagement and providing solutions. I've got some concerns regarding Killymoon Castle, a castle built in the 1600s with no pedestrian access, and I appreciate it's in early stages, but I think it's good to get on record your concern. You know, we talk about walking in blue-green, and I think it's important that a place like that, lots of people go walking, have that access.
I thank the member for his comments, and I had a very warm welcome in Cookstown, and I was pleased to go up for the public information days, and that was about trying to get the views of the public on the proposed Cookstown bypass. I am aware of local issues and local concerns. The member has raised one. The Killymoon Golf Course is another concern, and my officials have been engaging very closely with them. So I would be happy for my officials to meet with you and to talk through some of the concerns that you have in this particular matter.
Dr Archibald, one question, one response, I'm afraid.
Question 7, thank you.
Okay. I'm ambitious for a rail network, and I'm keen to do all I can to explore how we can progress rail improvements within the budgetary envelope that I have available. I believe that rail has huge untapped potential, and it can deliver multiple benefits right across our island, in particular in tackling regional imbalance and connectivity in the North West area in particular. So the member will know that in June 2020 I commissioned the feasibility study to get phase 3 of the Coleraine to Derry project back on track. This feasibility study has completed, and my officials are engaging with stakeholders, and a business case is being prepared for this work. I've also commissioned additional studies to explore the possibility of a half-hourly service from Derry to Belfast, as well as providing additional halts at Ballykelly, Strathfoyle and at the City of Derry Airport and Eglinton as well. I would say again, and I feel obliged to do it, that I am concerned at the financial focus having to be so much on maintaining the current public transport network, and it was disappointing in terms of the outcome of October monitoring. I'm hoping that that situation will be addressed in the January monitoring period, but I want to assure the member that I'm going to continue to make the case for investment in our public transport network and rail in particular.
Thank you. We now move on to topical questions. Mr Thomas Buchanan.
Minister, following the shambles of your department made of the procurement of a number of road resurfacing schemes in the West, can you now provide an update on the progress of the 29 schemes in Fermanagh and Omagh Council area and the 24 schemes in the Derry-Staban Council area?
Thank the member for his question. I don't have the specifics of the two areas that the member has highlighted. I'm happy to provide that information to you in writing, but I would take this opportunity to give a more generalised update on how we're working to address that problem. So the member will know that earlier this year the Department received legal challenges preventing the award of resurfacing contracts in 4 council areas. In my statement to the House on the 15th of June, I indicated then that officials were working at pace to develop an interim procurement strategy for resurfacing contracts consisting of term contracts supplemented by one-off contract packages. This strategy has been finalised following a pre-market engagement exercise that took place over the summer. The strategy consists of 4 phases with 6 new term contracts in each. I'm pleased to announce that my department published for tender the first phase on the 19th of November, and this includes the majority of the 4 areas impacted by the legal challenge. The Department anticipates being in a position to award these contracts next month to allow much-needed resurfacing to resume in these areas. Work on the next phase of term contracts is in an advanced stage with this and subsequent phases which will follow at 3-month intervals. In addition to this, 2 one-off contract packages are currently being tendered and a number of others are being prepared.
Mr Buchanan.
Thank you, Minister, for that. Can I ask the Minister, will these schemes be completed prior to the end of the financial year? And if not, will money allocated to them have to be returned?
I can't at this stage give an assurance that all of those schemes will be completed by this financial year, but we are working hard to try to do as much as we can. I want to also reassure the member that this year I have doubled the funding allocated to the Rural Roads Fund. So last year the member may be aware that we had allocated £10 million to that. This year I've allocated £15 million, and that's the highest level of funding yet allocated to a specific rural roads initiative. And just to reassure the member, none of that work is impacted by these legal challenges.
Ms Carol Nichola is not in her place. Ms Claire Sugden has withdrawn her question, so we're now going spotlight to Mr John O'Dowd.
Minister, could you outline what engagement your department or yourself has had with the Loughnane partnership over a recent period of time?
Yes, I've been in receipt of a number of correspondence on this particular issue, and my officials have met on a number of occasions with the partnership. I've also recently written to Minister Poots on the matter, given the limited remit that my department has, but also the contribution that his department can make, because I'm very keen that we take a partnership approach to dealing with the range of issues affecting our communities.
Yes, Mr O'Dowd.
Minister, I welcome your commitment to partnership working in regards to Loughnane. You'll be aware it supplies 40% of the drinking water to the north. It has huge tourism potential, huge economic potential, none of which has been properly developed because of a lack of partnership and working together across a number of executive departments. Will you undertake to pursue that work? And would you also undertake to consider including Loughnane as part of Waterways Ireland's project?
Thank the member for his question. I'm happy to continue to reach out. I've recently received a response from Minister Poots, and I'm given that consideration because I am keen that we work together on a range of issues. I think there's huge potential there. In terms of Waterways Ireland, the member will know that Loughnane does not currently sit within its remit, and I think the difficulty here will be one of funding and how that might be taken forward, but I'm happy to give further consideration to the issue.
Thank you. And now, spotlight, if we could call up Mr Justin McNulty. Mr McNulty.
Thank you, Minister, for your answers thus far. Minister, in terms of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, which you announced recently with Minister Ryan, which is an exciting review, the first for over 100 years, long overdue. Can you tell me how certain are you that there will be an hourly enterprise service between Belfast and Dublin, with every train stopping in Newry and with trains leaving in time to get people into work in Dublin on time? And can you commit to doing everything in your powers to ensure that the real connection between Portadown and Armagh is re-established? And it's long overdue that it is re-established.
I'm always amazed at the creativity and get multiple questions into one.
The Minister's under no obligation to answer any more than one.
In terms of the Portadown Armagh, I do recognise the importance of that, and the member will know that I've offered funding to try to advance the feasibility study for that. The Council is responsible for taking that piece of work forward. In terms of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review, the member will know that we have gone out to public consultation on that, and I would urge the member and all members to feed their views into that in terms of specific aspects of our rail network on the island that they would like to see advanced. I would also highlight to the member the UK Connectivity Review because Sir Peter Henry published the interim review on that, and it very much focused on rail. It talked about the strategic economic corridors, so the Dublin to Belfast corridor, but it also specifically referenced the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review as well. So across those number of fronts, I continue to try to progress these issues and be very keen to ensure that the member feeds through to the public consultation exercise to make his views known.
Mr McNulty.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer thus far. Minister, in keeping with the Green Agenda and the climate crisis, we all know we need to take radical action to address. With that in mind, will your officials commit to working with officials in the Shared Island Unit to see what options are possible for Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon and Newry, Moore and Down district councils to transform the Newry Canal and create a new blue-green artery through our countryside, the wonderful, beautiful countryside of Armagh, and something that can transform lives for generations to come.
Yes, I think the Minister's got the question. The tourism advert for Armagh was also an added bonus. Minister?
I can assure the member that I do have regular engagement with ministerial colleagues in the South, and we have regular discussions around the potential and opportunities from the Shared Island Fund. The member will be aware that the Taoiseach announced funding for the Ulster Canal through the Shared Island Fund. The Taoiseach has also announced funding from the Shared Island Fund for Narrowwater Bridge. So I want to assure him that we are in regular engagement, obviously through the North-South Ministerial Council meetings when they take place, but also in my individual ministerial engagement with Minister Eamon Ryan and also with Minister Dara O'Brien as well as the Taoiseach.
Sir Matthew O'Toole.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. Minister, we've heard today about questions about the reopening of the Lockmore line. We've also heard about questions about the chronic congestion and overdependence on the car in Belfast. Can I ask in that regard if she or any of her officials have been able to look, and will they look at some of the interesting proposals around connecting some of those lines up to create something that would look like a circle line for Belfast, either in the medium or long term? Is that something her officials are able to have a look at?
I thank the member for his question. This was actually an issue that I became aware about on social media, and there's been a very positive social media campaign around this. As yet, we haven't received any specific proposal. In respect of it, I would be keen to do so. And obviously, as we have discussed here at Question Time, but also on a number of occasions previously, work is ongoing on the Regional Strategic Transport Plan, and that provides a good opportunity to look at a strategic level on how we can improve our road and our rail network as well.
Mr. O'Toole.
Minister, I think most people would acknowledge that you as a Minister have done more to advance in terms of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review and the other feasibility reviews, the cause of rebuilding our shattered rail network in the north and across the island. But would you agree with me that if the Finance Minister, many of whose colleagues today have spoken about the importance of re-establishing a viable rail network here, if the Finance Minister believes in that and believes that it's part of the low-carbon transition, there has to be a meaningful commitment to it in the multi-year budget. Otherwise, it's just empty words. If we want to rebuild our rail network, we have to put money behind it.
I thank the member for his question, and I mean the truth is that there are severe financial pressures right across the executive. I am not going to deny that, but I also think that we need to be forward-thinking in terms of our investment. So for me, investment in public transport is a social justice issue because it primarily supports those who can't afford a car. It is also one of health and well-being because we know that heavy traffic pollution contributes to air pollution, which leads to respiratory difficulties and illnesses, often in our inner-city working-class communities. And also, as members will know, it's key in terms of tackling the climate emergency. So for all of those reasons, I think that we absolutely have to be investing in our publicly owned transport network. I never want to see a situation where we have a transport network where routes are only provided based on profit. For that to be the case, then we need to continue to invest to maintain our existing network and services, but we should absolutely be investing more to ensure that we can maximise our rail connectivity and maximise the public transport and its accessibility for communities, particularly our rural communities in the north.
Mr. Pat Sheehan.
Can I ask the Minister what measures she has taken to encourage and facilitate the Irish language within her departmental responsibility, including on public transport?
Yes, I'm happy to, and I want to preface my comments by saying that I'm very frustrated at the lack of progress in terms of Acna Gaeilge and also the establishment of the Culture, Languages and Identity Unit, which was a key commitment upon which we all came back to this place, and certainly the SDLP got around the executive table. In terms of my role as the Infrastructure Minister, the member will know about the Irish language signage and the glider in West Belfast. Obviously, our literature in the department in terms of the ministerial letters letters on our logo is dual language as well, Irish and English. And just very recently, I provided a green community car to Rathlin, to the community of Rathlin, to support them in their ambitions to be carbon neutral. And it was branded as well with Irish language in terms of the department's logo as well as English. Those are small efforts, but I want to be doing what we can, and I want to be working with executive colleagues to ensure that we can introduce an Irish Language Act to underpin all of this as quickly as possible.
Mr. Sheehan.
I thank the Minister for that answer. And of course, Irish language speakers are entitled to equality, and public bodies do have a responsibility to encourage and facilitate the language. And with that in mind, could she tell us what percentage of the public transport fleet have place names in Irish on their destination screens?
I wouldn't have that information to hand, but I absolutely agree that we should have equality, and that's why we should have an Irish Language Act underpinning everything, because it should have legislative equality. Once we have a legislative basis, that will drive investment because it will be a statutory requirement. But in the absence of that, we shouldn't be sitting doing nothing. And so I'm keen to do what I can to advance the Irish language and to ensure that we do get to that place where there is equality for Irish language speakers here in the North.
Dr. Kiva Archibald.
Thank you. Following the controversy over the Minister's countryside planning advice notice, will she commit to ensuring that any future guidance will be properly prepared in consultation with those that it will affect?
Yeah, now that the planning advice note has been withdrawn, I'm taking stock of all of the concerns raised in relation to it and countryside development in general. My officials will undertake further engagement and analysis on this important policy area, which will include consideration of current and emerging issues such as climate change legislation and our green recovery from this pandemic. My department regularly engages with councils and other stakeholders to understand how the planning system is working and to assist with its effective and efficient operation. My department's Chief Planner and Director of Regional Planning recently attended the NILGA executive meeting on the 12th of November to discuss planning issues, including the PAN and countryside development generally. Further engagement with Council officials on current planning issues will take place at forthcoming strategic planning group meetings, which are chaired by the Chief Planner and attended by Council heads of planning. I firmly believe that the SPPS does and should continue to provide opportunities for sustainable development in the countryside, striking a balance between supporting and sustaining rural communities and protecting the countryside from inappropriate development. I remain fully committed to ensuring that strategic planning policy for development in the countryside remains fit for purpose going forward.
That concludes questions to the Minister for Infrastructure. If members could take their ease for a wee moment, just for a change at the top table. Thank you.